Okay, welcome to 5.3. We are going to be graphing today, so you're definitely going to need your graphing calculator. So if you didn't grab that, pause the video, go grab it, and let's get to graphing. Okay, so to start off, we are going to go to our y equals in our graphing calculator, and we are going to type in this equation, square root of x. So type that in the y equals and hit graph. It should look, like a little swoosh, kind of like this on your graph, something similar, but let's actually get some points and let's put it on our graph. So if you hit second graph on your calculator, you can go to that table to get some points. So hit that second graph and let's write some down. If you notice at the negatives, it gives you an error. It says like no, not possible. I don't know what it exactly says. But if you notice, if you were to type in square root of -1, we can't do that. So that's why it's giving you errors on those negative options. So at 0, we had a point of 0. At 1, we had the point 1. We had the point 4, 9, 3. And then after that, we kind of run out of room on our graph. So let's stop there. So plot those points, 0, 0, 1, 1. 4, 2, 9, 3. So it looks like this lovely graph. Graph it out for us. It should look like that. Okay, now let's also state our domain. It's been a while since we've done that. Your domain always has to do with your x values, and your range has to do with your y values. So looking at our x values, if we were to kind of like scan this graph, the first x value we touch is at 0, and it is actually a point, so we are going to use a bracket. And then if you keep going, the x values, it's going forever and ever. It keeps going. So it's going to all of the positives forever and ever to infinity. For our y's, let's look. If we start in our negatives going up, the very first y value we touch is also 0 at a point, so I'm going to use a bracket. And then if you keep going up on the y values, this arrow is going to keep going, and it's going to keep getting bigger on the y's. So our y's are also going forever and ever to infinity. Okay, let's look at this next one. Graph it in your calculator. Go back to y equals, clear out that old equation, and let's type in the cube root of x now. You probably, once you get there to type that cube root, you got to go to math, and number 4 is a cube root. So type that in your calculator, and when you do type it in and you go to the graph, it should look kind of like this. If it doesn't look like this, I would go back to your equation. Something's wrong. And let's write down some numbers from our table. There's a lot of decimals in this, so let's just write all of the points that we possibly can from -10 to +10. So it looks like starting in the negatives is where I always like to start. The first point that I can put would be -8, 2. And then there's a lot of decimals in between, so the next one is -1, -1. 0, 0 is always a good one. 1, 1, and then we're in a lot of decimals again until 8, 2. So take that, plot that on your graph. Plot those points for me. 0, 0, and -8, 2. Oh, nope, that's all right. Oh, I forgot my negative on there. -8, -2. And 8, 2. All right, so it looks kind of weird with just dots, but connect them and put those arrows on the end, please, because it does keep going. All right, now that we have it on the graph, well, let's state the domain and range. So domain, the first x values, it starts with that arrow, so it's going to all those negative x values, so negative infinity. And then it keeps going to all the positive x values as well, so positive infinity. All right. Range has to do with y's. So if you're looking at your y's, this arrow does keep going. So it is going down. I know it's gradual, but it's going to all those negative y's. It's never going to stop. It's an arrow. And same thing with this arrow. It's gradually going up, but it is getting bigger on the y. So it just keeps going forever and ever to all the positive y values. All right, I know I've said it and I've said it many a times. Transformations are never going away in Algebra 2. They will always come back. So now we're talking about when we have roots. If we have roots, what are the transformations? So quick reminder, if you need to look back at old notes or something, I would do so. The number in the front. If the number in the front is negative, that is a reflect over the x-axis. If that number is in the front and it is bigger than 0, it's a vertical stretch. This is a rough. If that number is less than 0, so like a 1/2, that is a vertical shrink. The number right here tells you either left or right. So if that number is positive, it is left. If it's negative, it's right. And then the number on the very end is up when it's positive, down when it's negative. So let's state our transformations that are happening on each of these equations below. So the first one, I see there's a 2 in the very front. Since that 2 is greater than 0, that is a vertical stretch by 2. Okay, then underneath the radical, I see a +3. Since it's positive, that means it went left 3. All right, and then on the very end, there was a +5. So that tells me it went up 5. All right, on the next one, there's some stuff happening. I see a negative in the very, very front. So negative in the very, very front tells me it reflected over the x-axis. There's also a fraction, a 1/2, which is less than 1. So that tells me it is a vertical shrink by 1/2. Then underneath that root, there's a -1, so that's going to be right 1. And then the very end, there's a -3, so that is down 3. Lots of transformations happening. Okay, so let's look at these equations and let's just practice saying the transformations. If you want to graph it, you can. You don't really have to. Let's just practice the transformations. If you want to pause, use the last slide to help you out to think of the transformations and then come back and see if you're right. Okay, so example A, you should have said a reflect over the x-axis because there was a negative in front. You should have said left 2 for that +2 under the root, and up 1 for on the end +1. If you wanted to graph it, go for it. Don't have to. Just make sure you're okay with plugging in your calculator and plotting points. All right, the second one, there was nothing in front, but there was a -3 under the root, so that would be a right 3. And then the -1 in the end should have been a down 1. Okay, so take some time and practice this on the 5.3 worksheet.